that says developing intelligence.
Yeah, got it.
Okay, excellent. And I've just got here, can Johnny come out to play? And so just a little bit about my background. So um, I'm a bush kid, born and raised in the bush. And both my parents were deaf mutes. And some of you may or may not know that. But it's really interesting that if you're not looking directly at your parents, there's no communication going on. And so, how often are you ever looking directly at your parents? Especially if you're a little kid, you're off everywhere, especially if you're a bush kid, you want to get outside and you want to go to the bush. So as soon as our backs are turned, there is no communication going on. And so there's really only me and my brother. My brother was 18 months older than I am. And my father was a woodcutter. So about 300 or 400 meters away in the bush was a little bush sawmill. There's only about 4 or 5 people that operated it. My grandmother was, it was all steam generated. And my grandmother stoked the boiler. She was responsible for keeping the boiler up to, the head of steam. And then everything was driven by steam and those really big saws and those really big leather belts and things of that nature. So basically that was my playpen. My father was deaf mute. My auntie was deaf mute. My uncle was a deaf mute. So was my mum. And so basically there was me and my brother, and we were sign language. And so and we were off into the bush. And of course, mum can't call out, or your dad can't call out, where are you? And so we were so independent and so of ourselves for the first, few years. And of course, we didn't think of ourselves as being different because, there weren't that many kids around. So we were just normal. It wasn't until, the situation changed with the economy. We had to sort of move into a small town, and then I first had to go to school. And I didn't know how different I was. And of course, it took me, decades to really realize it because I just never knew what was actually going on. So we were sent to school, but we didn't have that much language. We were sign language mostly. And, the nuns didn't really understand. And so they expected us, because we could hear and, a little bit of language, they just thought we were just slow and useless, I suspect. But basically, I couldn't actually, I wasn't like the other kids. There was just something I just couldn't work out. And so being a bush kid and being so independent, after school, it was kind of like, yeah, we're okay, we're in a town, but we were so used to going out to play. And so, but there was nobody to play with, there's just my brother, but there was no bush. So I used to go from door to door to where the other kids lived and just knock on the door and just say, hey, look, can Johnny come out to play? And that sort of carried through. We left Tasmania when I was 7, went to, a different set of schools. And so again, I never really integrated well with that school, and then I didn't integrate well with the next school, but it was the same deal. Hey, look, can Johnny come out to play, or Sally come out to play, or whatever. And so I always remember that experience as a child. And so then, I grew up and get on about things, and around about the age of 40, I decided, well, look, I've got to do something about this thing called money. By 44, I was quite successful. And I started realizing that at 44 years of age, I was kind of as isolated as I was when I was a young kid, because now I didn't actually have to go to work. Everybody else was going to work. And so here I am, Monday to Friday, with nobody to play with. And I never got caught up in that social, that sense of importance, the fast cars, the jewelry, the luxury and all of that sort of stuff. I was still a bush kid at heart. And I realized that the reason why there's actually nobody to play with is because they're all really busy. doing this thing called work. And so I thought, well, shit, if I'm going to find somebody to play with, I better educate them into getting the time and space and the money so that they can come out to play. And that's been my lifelong ambition. So that's actually where it comes from. And so Keegan is actually spot on. So I'm still, trying to get people to come out to play. There's still not enough of us. So let's have a bit of a revolutionary look at this thing called play. And we meet Joseph Chilton Pearce for the first time. And he notes that
I
play,
just want to jump in and say thanks for that story. It's amazing.
you're more than welcome, Matt. So Joseph says that play is the only way the highest intelligence of mankind can unfold. The only way. And when you understand that, and then you look at all of the ways that play is prevented. When I was growing up in the 50s, we had all forms of rough and tumble. We could rip into each other on the playgrounds. We could do monkey bar stuff. We could do, diving off wall stuff. We could do, daredevil stuff, all of those sorts of things. And they're all now being sanitized and sanitized and sanitized and sanitized. And now kids can't even do cartwheels in the playground. And that activity, imaginative play, is the most important of all childhood activities because it's the dominant way that mastery of one's environment is cultivated. And so now the dominant message is safe, 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 sanitize, 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 sanitize. And so if it's the only way the highest intelligence unfolds, and if imaginative play is the most important of all, then we want to get back to that as children, as the children of your children, but also as adults, because there's no inhibition to our being able to develop our highest intelligence. But we're going to do it through play. We're not going to do it through work, and yet everything is oriented towards work. So Pearce coined the term creative competence to discuss the mechanisms of mastery of one's environment. And that's what, if you think about everything that you want to be able to achieve is only going to happen through mastery of a particular environment, which is called money. Because it's the money that's going to buy you the space and time that you can develop. So money is neither here nor there. I think Guy said, I just want it to be a tool. That's all it ever is, unless you're actually wired socially around it. Then you're going to think of it's something other than just a tool. You're going to give it all sorts of values, all sorts of meanings that the conditioned software wants to give it. Money is the root of all evil, etc., 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 etc. Money is hard to get, etc., etc., etc. It's just a tool. It's as easy to get as any other tool when you start thinking about it in a different way. Mastery of one's environment is going to be able to get you then to be able to come out and play. It says the children who miss out on this form of play go on to develop deep feelings of isolation and anxiety as adults. And so we can now see the amount of depression, we can now see the amount of mental illness, we can see all sorts of loneliness, we can see all sorts of things. So it just doesn't take a giant leap to see the results of what would happen if we're taken away from that sort of play environment. Psychiatrist, clinical researcher, and founder of the National Institute of Play, Stuart Brown. For those people who are reading Magical Child, Magical Parent, Stuart Brown's book is also really, really excellent based on play. Stuart Brown is, he's got the smarts that Joseph has. Here he notes that we are designed to play. And when we get to a certain part of it, I'll actually show you how they learn that we're actually designed to play. We're built to play, and we're built through play. So play literally shapes the brain and makes us smarter. And so play is downplayed in modern economies, and conditioning is upplayed in modern economies or modern educational processes. So just bear that in mind. When we play, we're engaged in the purest expression of our humanity, the truest expression of our individuality. Is it any wonder that often the times we feel most alive, those that make up our best memories, are moments of play? And you don't need to remember those moments of play because they are so emotionally charged, they go into the subconscious as a new program. The more you can do it, the more stronger the memories are, but you don't have to remember anything. It's already now straight in there. What you have to remember is what you're conditioned to do. And it's a really difficult thing to remember all of our conditioning because it just doesn't light us up. Play is intentionally pleasurable. It energizes and it enlivens. It decreases stress, softens our burdens, and renews our sense of optimism. So for all those people feeling lost, wouldn't it just be great to be alive, to have stress gone, to soften our burdens, to renew our sense of optimism? Well, so we do that through play, except most people don't have the space and time to come out to play. More than anything else, it opens us to new environments and new possibilities. And again, that sense of adventure that Keegan is building into all of the villages, that sense of play possibilities, the sharing of ideas, the camaraderie, the brotherhood, so to speak, and the new environments and the new possibilities that just that community or that communion of souls and minds can set up are just enormous. Play is something that is self-motivating and makes you want to do it again, whereas conditioning is the exact opposite. We have to put ourselves in the proper emotional state in order to play. I think a guy was talking about, are you playing, if you're playing with the dog, are you really playing with your dog? Well, if you're in that emotional state, the answer is yes, because it's now you are then fully present. So when play involves others, we learn the rules. What do we learn? We learn these unwritten social rules of engagement. Even if we're playing with our brothers and sisters, we're going to learn so much from that sort of interaction. And if the interaction with our brothers and sisters, like, mum is hurting me, and then mum comes and stops it, then the person that's doing the hurting hasn't actually learnt where to stop, hasn't actually learned the boundaries because he didn't get that far. And so all play, does that sort of stuff. So we can learn the rules of engagement. We can learn the ability to decide friend from foe. We can basically lose ourselves to time. We learn social rules and the creation of empathy. If mum's pulling me off all the time, I'm not going to learn that empathy. So where am I going to learn it if I don't learn it by bashing up my little brother and finding out that I can't go that far? Now I got it, sort of thing. So a lot of that is really not intuitive anymore because it's safe, which is basically a conditioning and process. So we learn social rules and the creation of empathy, and we gain knowledge of how the world of people and things work. If we don't learn those things, we're kind of sort of drifting and we're really lost. Original play is coined by play psychologist Alfred Donaldson. He is just a remarkable chap who really went into the world of play and the idea of play and the study of play in the most remarkable of ways. He basically went into nature and looked at how do wolves play. So what's their play behavior? How do bears play? How do lions and tigers play? How do wild animals play? And he literally lived and in those environments, and he literally played. He was accepted as into a pack of wild wolves because he learned the play rules and the play postures. He's had his head um, in a lion in the lion's mouth that was a wild lion. He's been sat on whilst he was in a cave by a wild lion, and and he felt safe. As that was happening. Of course, obviously he survived, but it was to do with understanding that real deep primal drive to play. So he said that original play is a physiological as well as a psychological state rather than a cognitive exercise or just a physical pursuit. And so that physiological and that psychological state is the important thing rather than the activity itself. Original play evolved over eons in many animal species as a means of promoting survival and longevity. And it was a way for all of the young examples of those species to learn about what they can do and what they can't do in a pack, in a herd, etc. So that they're able to survive within the social norms of what wolves do, or the social norms of what lions and tigers and do, things like that. So it's a state that shapes the brain, and it makes animals smarter and more adaptable. We are an animal. If we don't get that shaping, then we're not as smart as we could be, and we're not as adaptable as we could be. And the software engineering, they don't want you to be as smart as you could be, or as adaptable as you could be. They want you as predictable as they can make you, as conformist as they could make you. So that's why when you try to do things with the way that the software has been programmed, is it any wonder you can't actually do those things? You can do as much content learning as you like, but the answer is not in the content. The answer is actually in the behavior, which is new program development. Well, original play combines cognitive, affective, sensory, motor. It's not about game sports, winnings, losing, playing a game, or having fun per se, because they're culturally based behaviors rather than spontaneous psychological and physiological states. And so we really want to think about, okay, what's this cultural-based behavior on? And cultural-based behavior is part of the socialization and part of the conditioning. So Donaldson's observations of states rather than culturally based behaviors stem from decades of play experiences and research with children, research with adults, with animals all over the world. Like, he lived for years with animals, and he played as as a wolf would play. So original play is his now way of interacting with children and adults in the way that original play is interacted with in animal kingdoms. So basically, it transforms patterns of fear, aggression, and violence into love, kindness, belonging, courage, to be kind and safe in all situations. And so now he travels the world, educating people into beginnings of these play situations. So basically, it conveys a message of connection that's a powerful alternative to fear-driven learning and contest behavior. And so what we have within the social engineering culturally shaped process is fear-driven behavior and contest behavior. And so this contest behavior is really now what limits you. It doesn't really expand you. After experiencing a session of original play, a 10-year-old girl wrote, "Play is being able to tell the world that you don't like what it's doing to you and not harming anybody while you actually do it." The 6-year-old boy asked his teacher, "Can we practice playing? Because if we practice, we'll get good at it and we'll learn how to not hurt others and how not to get hurt." An 8-year-old boy with autism commented, "I wish I had a normal life. I wish I had a normal life." And then he sighed. And then he said, "This play is my reminder of a normal life." A 4.5-year-old boy remarked, "Nothing can get better than this." And the 6-year-old observed that real play is when nobody is crying and nobody has a broken heart. And so this is really, really powerful impacts on children that have never experienced this physiological and psychological states of play. So original play is as applicable in business, education, family, relationships, and health, because through it we demonstrate better ways to expend energy than in postures of self-defense and contest behavior. And that's what prevents most people from progressing. They don't consciously understand that a lot of their time is taken up in postures of self-defense, in postures of arguing, in postures of not believing the other person, of postures of wanting to put your opinion into the world rather than actually be present in that world. So there's always this contest behavior that's going on. In original play, we discover that love is so much more powerful than fear itself. In Higher Animals, notes Brown, play fosters empathy. It makes it possible for complex social groups and social organizations to form. For us, play lies at the core of creativity. The more creativity that you have, the more that you're doing original stuff, the more original stuff you're doing, the less time you are spending on what's already programmed into the software of the subconscious mind. And so creativity has you moving forward. There is nothing creative about doing things in the past and repeating the past. And that's conditioning. Cutting-edge science indicates that play is one of the most important factors in being a fulfilled human being. And again, that's my mission. Can Johnny come out to play? Can you guys come out to play? Developmental psychologist Bruce Lipton, he ignited the scientific community in the 1970s when he coined the term, "It's the environment, stupid." And if you've ever read his book, The Biology of Belief, which I really encourage you to do it, chapter 2 is "It's the environment, stupid." And so it was just a breakthrough discovery for him. And he says, "Look, I'll never forget a piece of wisdom I received in 1967 on the first day that he had learned to clone stem cells in graduate school." So he was cloning stem cells way before stem cells became popular. So, he's doing this in graduate school. It took me decades to realize how profound this seemingly piece of simple information or simple wisdom was for my work and my life. And this is the way that it basically came about. He said, "My professor, mentor, and consummate scientist was one of the first cell biologists to master the art of cloning stem cells. He told me that when the cultured cells that you are studying are ailing, you look first to the cell's environment, not the cell itself, for the cause. And yet we're taught to look at the cell for the cause, not the environment. We look at the person, we look at our parents, our upbringing as the problem, not the current environment that you're in. And so, again, our attention is diverted or it's actually hijacked. Though it wasn't apparent at the time, I eventually realized that this advice was the key insight into understanding the actual nature of life itself. When I provided a healthy environment for my cells, they thrived. When the environment was less than optimal, the cells faltered. And he went in and did some experiments, and unbeknown to him, see, stem cells are able to clone into basically anything. So if you culture stem cells, and you might be culturing, let's say, nerve cells from these stem cells, one time the technician that Bruce was working with just changed the recipe of the agar plate that they were cloning the stem cells on. And the stem cells that were being cloned into nerve cells actually started to produce muscle cells. And lo and behold, hang on, what was going on? Yesterday they were turning into nerve cells. Now today they're turning into muscle cells. And so Bruce didn't realize that the actual recipe of the agar would change. And then there was another example where they changed into fat cells rather than muscle cells or nerve cells, until he realized that the actual recipe of the agar had changed. So they changed the environment of the cell. And so changing the environment of the cell developed into a different thing. So basically, it's the environment, stupid. Since then, Lipton has been at the forefront of the development of this new science called epigenetics. So there is something operating above the level of the expression of your genes. And yet, modern theory says everything is your genes and you're genetic, and because you're Gen X this, you're going to end up with this, and blah, 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 blah. Well, this new science of epigenetics says, well, I don't necessarily agree with that. In fact, it's just not true. And so, but mainstream believes what it wants to believe. It's now understood that missing out on play is one of the most damaging stimuli a child can experience in terms of the development of empathy, creativity, social interaction, innovation, and intelligence. If missing out on play is one of the most damaging stimuli, what does society do to parents? It has them so occupied in busyness, there's just no time or no energy left in the small, respite you get from the activity of work to be fully into play. So, we just miss out on this over and over and over again. So, is it any wonder that people experience what they experience? Which concludes that the environment is everything, and there is nothing more important for the healthy development of children and their potential than the environment of play. The same goes true for your further development. The environment is everything. There is nothing more important in your development than the environment that you are in. And if the environment that you are in is not conducive to what you want, it's your responsibility to undertake change. Or not, it's your choice. Here's a picture painted in the 1600s. And whilst you might not be able to recognize all of the forms of play, all of the forms of play are actually in this picture. So down here, we have basically object play. And there's a couple of other examples of object play. And so we've got make-believe play or imaginative play. We've got, these kids, I think they're probably being jockeys or something. We've got, I don't know, seems to have sticks in their hand. And so basically we've got imaginative play. And here it looks like we've got storytelling play. Here we've got basically rough and tumble play. Here we've got, other forms of social play. We can see that, I'm not exactly sure what they're doing here. But I think this is like jumping over. So they're jumping over these guys side back. We've got some sort of social thing going on here. We certainly have got creative play. And so we've got all of the forms of play. We've got, this guy on stilts here. We've got this guy on stilts here. We've got this guy who's blindfolded and he's doing something here, but basically it's object play. We've got again object play here. These people look to be, I don't know, bowling or doing something with these stones that looks to be a ball here. Obviously, there's a person celebrating with two things in her hand here. And so everywhere you go, there's this sort of social play going up here. You can see the you can see the conga line up through here, and again you can see it back through there. So such an important painting that at first glance you wouldn't actually recognize it unless you really looked and understood what was actually going on. One of the biggest breakthroughs in understanding the impact of the lack of play during childhood came in the 1990s. And it was a time when Caltech, which is basically the academic home of NASA's Jet Propulsion Laboratory, or JPL, was experiencing a significant problem with this experience of age-related loss of its skilled workers. So its skilled scientists and skilled engineers were all starting to retire in basically the 1990s. Now, since the 1960s, these scientists and engineers were responsible for every manned and unmanned mission into space. They were responsible for building robot vehicles that started to explore the surface of Mars. And whenever a complex problem was handed to them, they would always say, look, yep, we'll just figure it out. But in the 1990s, when JPL and Caltech were recruiting the best and the brightest minds from the best universities and the best engineering schools around the world, the new recruits just weren't simply able to match the skills and the inventiveness of their retiring counterparts. And they couldn't actually problem solve. Well, the bright new engineers excelled at all of that sort of theoretical and mathematical problems. Their greatest weakness was in areas of applying theory to practice. And unlike their retiring role models, not only were they unable to spot the key flaws in complex systems, they were lacking in their ability to toss ideas around, to toss ideas backwards and forwards, to play with them, pull them apart, think about them, the critical elements of whatever, and reassemble them so that they would have these innovative new ways that led to unique solutions. And although those engineers had earned the highest degree, the highest grades at their universities, they were lacking in their ability to innovatively solve problems. And so JPL and Caltech just couldn't make out what was going on. What they eventually discovered was that those who had actually experienced original play as children, those people that had worked with and tinkered with and played with their hands and built things and did this object play, they pulled things apart just to see how they worked, and they put them back together. We're more able to see and invent solutions that those who actually hadn't worked with their hands and experienced as children. When I was a kid, everybody was pulling their cars apart and putting themselves back together and building better cars. They would just take old cars, do them up, turn them into hot rods. Basically, everybody was doing it. It wasn't difficult to pull an engine in, pull it out, rebuild the engine, stick it back in. And almost nobody, kids just don't do that today. Once the toy breaks, they just basically toss it and get a new one. When they forensically looked at the situation, Caltech found that the older engineers had played with and taken apart all sorts of gadgets, radios, crystal sets, engines, and clocks. Crystal sets are part of my childhood. Made and assembled billy carts. Billy carts are an extreme part of my childhood. Fixed broken cars and appliances. Way before they became engineers. Caltech discovered that the magic of play and its creativity was critical for success and inventiveness. They also discovered that the escapism of play and problem solving was missing in the early lives of most engineers. As a result, Caltech started to change the way that they interviewed. They changed the criteria to access the level of useful projects that or types of play that each experience or applicant had experienced in their formative years. So neuroscientists now recognize that at its most basic level, play is pre-verbal. And that's a really important place. It's pre-verbal, and it arises out of our ancient biological structures that are deep within our pre-conscious mind, that the mind before the subconscious, before the conscious. So if play predates language, play predates the development of the paleo-mammalian brain. Play is in fact in the original brain or in the reptilian brain. That's the play center. So if it's in that center, can you see how important it is? It's still there. It's still in that center. It's pre-verbal. It's ancient biological structures deep within our pre-conscious mind. What does conditioning and social engineering do? It takes our conscious mind and it directs us to repetition, repetition, and mind-numbing conditioning or structured learning. Donaldson explains that to fully understand original play requires you to experience it rather than talk about it. And so basically, I used to teach people how to run businesses that they could actually teach these kids how to, and teach parents how to engage with their kids in original play. Because of its improvisational, spontaneous, and voluntary nature, play allows children to stumble upon new behaviors, new thoughts, new strategies, new movements, fresh insights on this idea of risk and ways of being. Who wouldn't want that for the children? Who wouldn't want it for themselves? You can still get it now. And it's that will help you develop into being able to experience the things that you actually want, which then will open the door for you to come out and enjoy more of this thing called play. So with that, I'll just open it up for some questions.
Hi, Paul.
Hey, Peter.
Yeah, thanks for that. It's really insightful. When it comes to play, I think I have four children, two boys, 17 and 16, and the girls 10 and 9. And I think for the first part of it, I played with our boys, but now that they're older, I feel I missed that boat. And play with older children and adults as well. In some cases is different, and I just interested to know ways to I guess promote that with the two older kids. And the current way to do it now is to play like games like Upwards and involve them with the play with the little girls. So I'm interested to know other ways to play with them even though they're becoming young men.
Well, basically it's space and time. And so if you can engineer the space and time and you take them back into the environment where play can actually take place. And
Yeah.
so, if you go into the environment, and again, this is a really difficult thing because basically you're the parent of those children, and whatever you've set up is already now part of whatever you've set up.
That's
Now,
right.
you know, they may be off with their mates and all of that sort of stuff, but nothing is going to happen until you actually get space and time.
Yeah, I find the best is to involve them with the play with the younger children.
Well,
Uh,
whatever it is, but it's still going to require space and time.
yeah,
But you and the bigger boys can, you know, go off and do things like adventuring. You can go off and do things like solitude. You can go off and do things like, the grand outdoors, or work on projects together, because it's not necessarily the work on the project that's important. It's actually the space and time that you're sharing together. Now, if you're like any any dad with kids, somebody's going to set up and want to prank you in some way, shape, or form. That's just a form of play. And so now, how do you actually set up a prank? Well, that's creative play, isn't it? And so,
yeah,
you know, how much imaginative play you can get into. I do have part 2 of play, which is talking about the 6 types of play. But I'm going to do that at the end of the day, or at the end of the weekend, because I'm not sure. I just want to get through the other material before I go back into talking about the different types of play and how you might actually set them up.
yeah. Thanks.
Does that make sense?
Yeah,
But
sure.
basically, it's all requiring space and time. So the more space and time you've got to throw at it, um, you know, I mean, you know, one of those ideas that came out yonks ago was a game called Twister, and it's amazing what actually happens in a game of Twister, where you've just got to get tangled up in each other's body. That's almost like a form of original play.
Yeah, we actually use
But
that a lot.
yeah. So like, but if you're if you just look at some of the videos on original play, it's about, you know, the older kids letting the younger kids really just you know, explore their physicality. And of course, because they're bigger kids against the little kids, the bigger kids have to be aware of the physicality, and let the younger kids lead that play, lead that experience, rather than tell them what they can do and what they can't do.
Yeah,
And there's the young kids that learn, but it's also the older kids that learn from the young kids, because they're just so much bigger and stronger. So it's like adults playing with, little kids, that the physicality is just vastly different. And so you've got to be that much more malleable and just careful where you roll and tumble on. So basically you're doing it on the floor. You can't just roll over and squash somebody.
oh yeah,
So,
no, that's great. Space and time explains it all, to be honest.
mm, mm.
Thanks.
Thanks for
Anybody
that.
else?
What's the difference between play and original play?
Uh, uh, Basically, play, capital P play. There's all sorts of different forms of it. So, you know, like I said, there's object play. There's also attunement, and attunement is given as a form of play. But attunement sort of happens at the earlier stages of life, and it especially happens between uh, um, young babies and their parents. So all mammals go through a process of attunement. And attunement is eye-to-eye contact. So eye-to-eye melding. Okay. And you've got a little window that's somewhere around between 3 months and 6 months. And the amount of eye-to-eye contact between both parents, or mother and child, father and child, during that 3 to 6 month window, the greater the bond, the greater the mind meld. There's actually a mind meld going on between a parent and child. If there is no attunement going on, then that mind meld, it's the time is past now. It will never actually. So you'll never have that close relationship with a person with a child that's never attuned. So, for example, um, uh, children that are taken away from parents or whatever, given up for adoption or given up for orphanages and all that sort of stuff, they never go through that attunement process. And so they're really, 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 they have a life that is so much different than the life of somebody who has gone through that attunement process. But I'll get into that a little bit more. So there's object play, there's an imaginative play, but that original play is basically what animals do. So if we forget the humans, You know, how do we actually communicate and all of that sort of stuff. And remember that that original play comes from that pre-verbal, pre-cognitive, deep biological process that's actually in the original brain. It's not in the paleomammalian brain, and it's not in the neocortex, and it's not in the prefrontal cortex. And I'll show you the experiments where they actually worked that out. The experiments are a bit horrible, but anyway, that's how they worked it out.
See earlier how you said we should look to Keegan or people in front of us.
Sorry?
You said before we should look to Keegan or people who have the skills or the ability to make money to then be able to mirror or gain them skills.
Yep.
So with play, should we be looking to play with someone who's beyond our level as well?
Absolutely. You know, play is play. It's not contest behavior. It's about the way that energy flows. Let me do this little thing for you. So if you're in a room with another person, do this with another person. If you're in a room by yourself, just do it by yourself, okay? So just hold up both of your hands. Somebody's driving, so maybe not you, Matthew. You just continue driving. Now, you nominate one of those hands to be a fist and the other hand to he's driving with his knees. So nominate one hand to be a fist and the other hand to be just an open palm. Okay. Now, place your fist into your palm and push your fist as hard as you can possibly push it. Good on you, Matthew. Okay. Now, just relax. Now, what were my instructions to you? Can somebody just tell me the instructions I just gave you?
Put your fist into your hand and push your fist as hard as you can.
Yeah. What did I say to do with your left hand?
You didn't say what hand.
So what did you all do? You did something with your left hand that you weren't instructed to do.
We resisted.
Yeah. So that resistance and that competitive behavior, it has been so socialized and so wired into us that the energy can't flow anywhere because we're so busy resisting where that energy could flow.
I was the only one that didn't do it.
Because the seat wouldn't push back.
Why I couldn't go anymore, but I knew what you were doing.
Okay, good on you.
Yeah.
Does that make sense to you? So you all filled in an instruction that you weren't given. And we do that automatically because we're so hardwired into this competitive behavior. And this competitive behavior is resistance. And so your resistance is happening through your mind. Your resistance is happening through your reality tunnel. Your resistance is happening through your conditioning. So it doesn't really matter how many times I tell you how to actually get free, you're going to resist it without even realizing that you're going to resist it. Your beliefs are going to come up and your values are going to come up and your lack of time, your excuses, all of those sorts of things are going to arise. They're all forms of resistance. And remember that energy can't flow where it's being resisted. Any thoughts on that?
Paul, can you just explain that again about the fists? I think I just missed a little something around, like Ian said. So you instructed us to
Do that.
push the fist.
Yeah, as hard as you can.
And we resisted. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
I didn't ask you to do anything with your left hand or the other hand, but you all resisted. So the energy didn't go anywhere.
Mhm.
So if we're watching content
So
about,
that's the way that your thoughts and attitudes, without you realizing and because it's resistance, it'll always resist something new, because something new will be uncomfortable to the way that you now perceive the world. We might say that, oh, look, I'm up for anything, I'm up for everything, but we just don't know how much that software is wired to do what the wires of that software want it to do, which is predictability. And resistance is predictability, isn't it? And so it doesn't take much to resist it. It takes an enormous amount to be open. And so every time you argue with your partner, every time you argue with kids, that's just now another form of resistance. So just understand that the energy is not flowing. It's just being resisted. Somebody was saying something.
yeah, I just wanted to extend that example back out into like a real life. So if we're, let's say that the information that we consume through content is the instruction to resist,
Yeah.
and a real life form of this hand would, well, first of all, you're saying actually that content is not even the right content, but even if it was, we would still be contending with the fact that every other part of our life is stacked against the instructions that we're being told to follow.
Yeah. So if you think about those people who are really skilled in certain forms of martial arts, they can make energy flow basically through walls, through concrete. Some of the masters, they don't even have to touch you to basically knock you off your feet, because they've mastered the art of getting energy to flow. Does that make sense? If it doesn't make sense, it might become clearer. So, part of the content, or most all of the content I've got after this, and just layers and layers and layers in complexity. Okay. So this is not going to be an easy weekend to get your head wrapped around. And so all I'm attempting to do this weekend is just give you all of this content that hopefully we can start to build memory hooks on. It will become clearer at the end of this process than it will be at the beginning. So I'm not expecting anybody to get it. I'm not expecting the penny to drop. If the penny does drop, if you do get it, then that's fine. But there's no expectations from me. And if there's none from you either, then that's good. You just let it flow over you. But what you'll experience is resistance, because it'll be confusing. It just probably won't make sense. They're all just forms of resistance. Rather than that, just let the energy flow over you, because the more you let that energy flow over it, the more we can actually now take bits of it and build and build and build and build on them. Okay, so any other questions?
I have a question, actually. Paul, I was playing with this idea of play as relationship to everything, as opposed to play being something that we do. And then also when you were talking about resistance before that, I wrote down one of my things when I was young, and not why I wouldn't play sometimes when I wanted to, is because I was afraid I would break something or get in trouble. And then this reminded me of Pierce's idea of unconflicted behavior. And then I was thinking how this all ties into that sort of my desire to just let my relationship with life be just play. I play quite a bit, but like you were saying, I don't have a lot of friends that like to play, because everything is for a lot of people has a way it's supposed to be. And so
Yes.
my friends will say, you live in pretend land. So I live in the land of let's question everything and play and see what we can construct. I don't do it very well always, but nonetheless. Anyways, maybe a couple words to say to that. And I just love this. When you say like behave wealth, I just took that and like learn to play, or behave play. What does that even mean to bring that on? Anyways.
So let's wrestle with it. And the very opening statement, I think you talked about you're afraid to break or get into trouble. Okay, so that's fear-based learning. That's fear-based conditioning. you know, so, and it's part of the conditioning process. And so
Mhm.
you are really literally being conditioned by that process.
Yeah,
And so
absolutely.
again,
And it tied in very
it's,
well to like the resisting of the fist. And
yeah, it stifles the energy because it can't flow anywhere now,
Mhm.
because you're operating on fear, which is fear is the last form of consciousness that can now still be mass manipulated, which is why there is so much fear-based stuff in media and mainstream and all of that sort of stuff, because we can herd people who are fearful.
I'm so capable
just
of hurting myself with my own thinking.
just think about a couple of years ago.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, so let me just organize the next paper. So I'll just this. You can ask questions as I just get organized.
Hey, Paul.
Anyway, here you go.
One
Yep.
thing I'm one thing I'm thinking about is you're talking about, you know, the resisting of the and how that prevents the flow of new ideas. I think the challenge for me is how do we know what we're supposed to resist and what we're supposed to allow to flow through? I think, you know, like we're here because we trust Keegan, who trusts you. So I think we're all in a state of wanting to not be resistant. But you're one voice, and there's lots of voices out there. And how do we know how we stay open to the right voices and have the discernment to know which ones those are?
Well, if you think about why would you resist any voice?
Okay, yeah, I see it. When I say resist, I think it's saying that this voice is not healthy for me. I don't think this is a healthy voice for me.
Yes. Now, you can intuitively work that out. You can
Mhm.
intellectually work that out. You can actually observationally work that out. Because if you're asking the question, well, how do you know? Well, then how do you know anything?
Mhm.
You're only going to know it through learning and being open. So it's not the voice that is problematic, it's how you interpret the voice.
Yeah, and I
And
think
that's your
sorry.
that's your responsibility. So
Yeah, I think it's seeing what are the fruits of listening to that voice? Where does it take you if you go down the path a little bit and see what the results are?
well, see again, if we listen to your language pattern, where does the voice take you? So
Mhm.
you are actually saying, I am not responsible. I am
Mhm.
reaction. So I'm going to react to the voice rather than be responsible for how you're interpreting that voice. So if you think about, I can't think of any situation where there is not, you know, either shallow learnings or deep learnings that are available. And so for me, all opportunities to learn are valuable. Now, what did you learn? Did you learn that if I drive my car into a solid wall, then you know, chances are my car's not going to survive, and chances are I'm not going to survive. Well, I probably don't want to practice that. I probably don't want to even do it first, you know, because I can use my sort of discerning ability to say, well, you know, okay, yep, I'm open to that possibility. Just not one that's useful for me, because it's not going to lead me to where I want to. It's not going to advantage me. It's not going to, you know, give me the next step in the pathway of where I can actually get. So basically, you are responsible for discerning, interpreting the meaning of that. You're responsible for meaning making. Or you are not responsible. So if you are not responsible, you are reacting. And so you are at effect and not cause. If you are responsible, then you are no longer at effect, you're at cause.
Mhm.
And again, you can use, well, okay, there's some possibilities here that I can use, that I can incorporate, that I can reassemble, I can rearrange, that have the possibility of getting me closer to the outcome that I want. And if there's little bits of that, then great, take them on board. If there's big bits of that, then great, then take them on board. So I have a particular philosophy that says nobody has to earn my trust. Okay, so I don't wait for people to show me that I can trust them. When I engage in people in a sort of a bit of a sort of a more immediate and deeper way, I immediately give them all of my trust. Okay, so then I've already done that. I don't need to, there's no contest behavior going on in me. Now, after I give you my trust immediately, there's only two things can happen. You can actually entertain that, or you can abuse that. But that's up to you. It's not a statement about me. It's a statement about you. Now, have I been taken by a ride by cleverer and more cunning people than me? Yeah, absolutely. By giving them my trust. But see, I don't want to be on guard. I don't want to live life like that. I want to live life much more spontaneously. So if you screw up, you screw up. You're not going to do it twice. And more for you. Because where could I have assisted you to be? So, yep, you can take the short path. You can, you can con me if you want to con me, but you're not going to do it twice. And basically, I'm the creative power that actually got to the space and time that I now enjoy. If you're busy going out there conning people, then that's on you. Does that make sense? So nobody has to earn my trust. I already give it. The only thing that you can do to it now is lose it. So, and then I'm not expecting everybody to do that. I'm just saying this is where I come from. So, we trust Keegan. So therefore, okay, so Keegan's got to bump that sort of trust onto me and blah, 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 blah. No, it doesn't work like that. It certainly doesn't work like that for me. If I haven't demonstrated enough by now, and if you've been tuning into the previous presentations and the previous Q&As, then I certainly haven't done my job. And the other way that you can know whether there's trust being, whether trust is being offered or on offer, is just think back to everybody that's actually you've had interactions with, or you've had learnings from, or you've attended their webinars or their seminars, or whatever it is that you do. Ask yourself, how many of them have given you as much Q&A time as I've given you in every single interaction with you collectively? My guess is very few, if any. So think about that. Does that make sense, Chris?
Yeah, a lot of things you said there made sense. I appreciate that.
Good on you. Okay, so let's get on to the next. So this is, I'm going to sort of enter a little bit of complexity here, but hopefully it goes down okay. Like I said, I'm not expecting everybody to get it. Just at least entertain it and just remain open to it. And so if resistance comes up, just make a note of that. And if you do make a note of it, just sort of jot down when it came up. So then we can have a bit of discussion after. Okay, so you should be able to see a slide that says downward causation. Is that okay? So basically, it's the science and philosophy behind getting more of what you really want. So this is the recipe. So given that we talked about part of that process is information, part of that process is behavior, part of that process is time for building skills, part of that process is support, and part of that process is the whole perceptual model that you're currently using. So behavioral, attitudinal, all of that sort of thing. So what you do with your conscious mind is basically the key that determines the outcomes you experience, whether those outcomes are what you want, what you don't want, whether they're positive, negative, or however you want to explain them. So basically what you do with your conscious mind is energy. And it's energy that you author into time and space. Just like if you're writing a book and you publish that book, you put the words into time and space, your thoughts are exactly the same thing. Every time you think something, you author it into time and space because it's energy. It goes into time and space. Every time you behave, you are actually authoring into time and space. You know, if your authorship is based on I can't, well, that's going into time and space. If your authorship is based on I can, that's going into time and space. If your authorship is it's not my fault, that's going into time and space. If your authorship is based on, hey, look, I can do anything, I just got to get the person to show me how, that's going into time and space. So basically, what you do with your conscious mind is the key that determines what you experience. What you author is what you experience. So the energy that you put into time and space literally shapes your mind. It literally shapes your mind, just like water on the landscape shapes and sculpts the landscape. The way that you move energy around your brain, around your neurons, will either enhance the connections between the neurons, or they will, or those connections will be lowered, so that you're not getting as much energy flow as you possibly could. This truth is so empowering that the realization of it will literally change your life forever, says Sandra and Taylor. But as you'll see, there's more to this idea that first meets the eye. Remember that your software has been programmed by social engineers for what social engineers want. And that's what you're authoring into time and space, which means that you get the lifestyle that you are getting not by your design, but by the design of the environment. It's true that every moment of our lives, whether we're asleep or awake, we're actually sending and receiving energy in the form of thoughts and vibrations. And, you know, if it's energy, then it'll be measurable, won't it? And so in the energy of love, we can measure that, and we can see how strong the wave motion is. If the energy of fear, we can measure that, and we can see how strong or how aggressive or how the wave of that energy might be different to the wave energy of joy and happiness, for example. So vibrations are what we experience, and then we turn those vibrations into feelings. We turn the feelings into words, and we turn basically those words allow us to have thoughts. So, you know, a lot of the energy is just, a lot of the words we use is just now labels for the energy that we're experiencing. Feelings are the tangible expressions of the vibrations, and language is what we use to label our feelings so that we can communicate with others through them. Now, it's not the only way we communicate, because you can walk into a room and suddenly pick up the vibe. And so there's some sort of, you know, system at work that allows you to pick it up even before thought and even before basically language. So every moment, different energies interfere. So interfere means they're basically impacting each other, or they're connecting with each other, or they're actually meeting each other. So we just call that an interference pattern. It's neither good, bad, right, or wrong. It's just as soon as one energy meets another one, we just call it an interference. And so we can measure those things. We can basically have the peak of a wave, we can have the trough of a wave, and then from the middle to the peak is what we call the amplitude. So basically, how strong is this? Okay. So basically, the greater the wave function, which is amplitude, whether positive or negative, the more power and energy that wave has. So if we think about a trough and if we think about a peak, and we put a line through the middle, then we can actually, use some measurements. It doesn't matter what measurements we use. I'm just using a rudimentary one here. So from the middle to the peak, we just call that +1. And from the middle to the trough, we just call that -1, just for the sake of having something to think about. So when waves are in sync, so when two energy systems meet each other and they're in sync, then the valley or the peak and the valley or the trough and the peak, the hill, which is the amplitude, it doubles the wave when the wave crosses over each other. So basically the amplitude increases because they're in sync. So that means one wave is basically going up and the other one is going down at the same time. So when wave energies converge, interference takes place, and as each wave interferes with each other. So we're doing that when we meet people, we're doing that online, we're doing that now. So basically there's energy coming through all of our technology. I can push and pull that energy by increasing my voice, by increasing the speed that I'm talking, or slowing that voice down and pulling that sort of energy back and using a deeper tone. So there's lots of we can do with energy. So basically the resulting interference pattern is the result of adding the power of the waves together. So if they're in sync, then if they're in harmony, they'll be going up at the same time and down at the same time. So basically we add them together and then we get a stronger process. So we get +2 and we get -2, which now is a stronger wave. So if you're in love with somebody and they're in love with you and it's in sync, that energy is multiplied. If you're in love with somebody, they're not necessarily in love with you, but we've got an interference pattern going on. If they don't like you as much as you like them, there's a certainly mismatch, but basically that energy is dissipated in a lot of senses. So at the point of conversion, the power of the wave is doubled, and as each positively interferes with the other. If the waves are completely out of sync, one will be going up, and one will be on the way up, and the other will be on the way down. So +1 and -1 cancel each other out. So basically, the interference pattern negates the power. So hopefully that's okay. So far. So once you actually lose sight of your goal, there's something interfering with your units of attention. There's something hijacking your units of attention. Once you lose sight of your goal, that goal no longer exists, and nor does the energy to attain that goal. It no longer exists because it's been dissipated and it's been taken somewhere else. Now, generally, you would have given that energy that you could have used for focusing on your goal, you would have given it over to whatever is distracting you in your immediate environment. It might be something on social media, it might be some form of drama, it might be some form of concern, it might be some form of worry or stress, all those related things. Now, I'm not saying that that stuff doesn't happen in the real world. All I'm saying is if you understand that the pattern of energy is now interfering with the energy that you could be utilizing to go to your goal. Okay, so it flattens the power of your energy and it negates your power to move forward on what you say you want, because now you're giving that energy over to stress, worry, concern, rather than over to somebody who could, let's say, ratchet that power up by giving you more clarity, by giving you more support, by giving you more certainty, by giving you more information, by giving you more skills, by helping you develop, blah, blah, blah. Distraction causes conflict. So a conflicted mind. And so Chilton Pearce's idea of the conflicted mind. And if you've heard me talk about, basically if you're in a dark room and there's no windows and there's a light switch, so the light is either on or off. And so if you think something into reality, that is already now as real as any other form of reality. It just exists in a form that you can't directly observe, but it's as real as any other form of reality. Until you stop, until you concern, until something takes that thought away from you and you give your attention over to somewhere else, which means that you're now turning the light off. So it can't be half on, it can't be half off. And so it's either on or off. And so for me, once you actually think something into reality, it's a done deal. Your job now is to emote it into reality. And that's the vibrational, that's the energy part of it. And if you allow that energy to be hijacked by somebody else, then that's where we've got to start work and support with you. Basically, distraction causes a conflicted mind, and the idea that the light in your dark room now is off. Okay, so it now no longer exists. This results in non-deliberate or unconscious causation. So now you're causing, but you're causing unconsciously. Now you're manifesting, but you're manifesting unconsciously or non-deliberately. See, your mind's software is programmed by cultural engineers for a particular set of outcomes. The outcomes that they want is predictability and obedience and servitude. And so look around you and look at people who are living those lives. And it's okay. I'm not saying this is a value driven. I'm just saying, hey, that's the way it's programmed. Because the more people that they can have that is predictable, obedient, and the servitude, then the more wealth that they can create, the more control they have over you. Now, you can work that software harder. You can work that software with better set of wishes. You can work that software for longer hours. You can take out huge loans against that software, but you can never make it do what you want it to do until you actually change your programming. And you change your programming not by going back and tinkering with that software, but you change your programming by putting a new program in. And you do that through repetition, 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 which is part of the behavioral process. To deliberately create, it's important to understand the rules of energy and causation and how you might apply them. So causation refers to the act or the process that produces an effect. And so the effect that some of you want is to be able to come out and play. Well, you have to cause that. And so for you to come out and play requires you having more space and time. Okay, so what will actually give you more space and time? Well, that's money. Okay, so you now need to cause more money. Okay, now I can teach you how to cause more money because it's the same. You do that the same way you cause anything. You do it deliberately. You can't do it non-deliberately. You can't do it the way that software is programmed. What you can do with the way the software is programmed is lose money. Mental causation refers to the ability of the mind to produce an effect in the external world. We all have that ability. We all have that ability. So conscious causation can be understood more broadly by looking at the 3 laws of thought. And the first law basically says that which is like unto itself is drawn. So like energy attracts like energy. There's nothing exists in the universe that's not affected by this law. The second law says that which I give thought to and that which I believe or expect is. So it's the thoughts or the energy of your thoughts that shape the landscape. It shapes your mental scape. It shapes your lifescape. That which you give, if you're giving your thoughts to distraction, if you're giving your thoughts to drama, if you're giving your thoughts to energy, to worry, all of those sorts of things, to non-productivity, if you're giving your thoughts to competitive, being right, right way thinking, again, the energy is not flowing anywhere. And so you are creating what it is that you are giving your thoughts to. In short, you get what you consistently think about, whether you actually want it or not. There's no escaping it. It's a law. The mind is shaped by what it rests upon. The energy of thought is literally the language of consciousness. For example, I use my mind to produce thoughts that will my body to undertake certain behaviors. So I can use my mind to cause an effect in the physical world. I can will my body to chop, tons of firewood. So now I'm going to have an impact in the external world. And as I do that, I make changes in the physical world. I've converted the energy of logs into shorter forms of energy, and then convert that energy into warmth. And that warmth, basically, that energy is now dissipated. It's never lost, but it can change form, and I can cause it to change form. If I keep doing those behaviors, I gain greater skills, and by gaining greater skills, I have greater impact on my external environment. The same happens with business, the same happens with money, the same happens with lifestyle. It's the same recipe. So the recipe is constant. I can impact, I turn my behaviors towards precious metals. I can turn my behaviors towards cryptology. I can do that, and I can become more skilled at it, and I can gain the benefits of that. The third law states that you manifest what you allow. And this is really important when that lesson about resistance comes into focus. I am that which I am, and I am willing to allow others to be which they are. And that last part of that is generally what breaks down for most people. Because you have such a desire to change who they are. You need them to behave like this, you need them to do this, you need them to speak like this, to feel this, to be present in this form, whatever. Okay? So you are not allowing, or you're resisting allowing them to be who they are. And so you don't meet them where energy is flowing, you meet them where energy is resisting. When you allow others to be who they are, even if they don't allow you, resistance, judgment, blame, story making, excuse making, projection have really fallen into the thought form. And so when you can move past that, they all fall away, and now you operate at the level of acceptance. And acceptance is a higher form of energy, or a higher form of consciousness than courage. In fact, on a logarithmic scale, we can actually measure it, and I'll show you where acceptance is. And if you're into the energy of acceptance, then energy is flowing, and you are now creating at a much more higher level than, let's say, fear or desire. So to understand how deliberate causation works, it's important to understand that you consist of two beings. There's a physical you that's been conditioned to experience life through that sort of egocentric awareness. And every time you make something, every time you self-reference, you're actually working through that egocentric awareness. So every time you make you statements, every time, you know, I feel sort of statements, you're actually doing that through that egocentric awareness. Every time you self-reference, we know that that egocentric awareness is actually in play, or that's the consciousness that you're using. Whether you realize it or not, whether you recognize, whether you're conscious of that or not, but that's how you tell. And so that's how you tell whether, you know, what state of awareness somebody else is in, is whether, you know, to what extent are they self-referencing? To what extent are they making it about you impacting them? There's also the non-physical you. It's an inner being that experiences all forms of energy, whether those energy forms are subtle or basically their grace. So often referred to as your inner being or your higher self or your soul, and there's many ways of, you know, we can communicate that. And again, we're just using words to communicate the vibrations. Okay, your non-physical you is capable of experiencing higher levels of consciousness. So if it's capable of experiencing higher levels of consciousness, it's capable of creating so much more than the physical you. And so the physical you is what's been socially engineered and socially conditioned. And it's only ever going to do predictable, obedient, and servitude, because that's basically what the software is programmed for. So your inner you is broader, older, wiser, and much more powerful than your physical you. It's been conditioned through decades of social conditioning. So if you just look at this chart over here, so here we have a logarithmic scale of energy. So basically from 20 up to 1,000. And so because each level can be calibrated because it's energy, and so it can be measured, all forms of energy can be measured. So they're just being given a scale here, and it's a logarithmic scale. So there's a huge leap between 350 and 400, for example. And so basically, there's not much energy or consciousness at the level of shame. If there's any lower level than that, you're probably deceased. And so there's not much energy in guilt or apathy or grief or fear. So fear is calibrated at the level of 100. And so basically, you can't mass organize, mass manipulate audiences who are in grief, because basically it's just too powerful. It's too lower energy. So apathy, well, basically they're given up. Guilt, shame, they're just not here. Okay, so that's why fear is the lowest form of consciousness that is mass manipulatable. So basically, if you think about all the big populations, all the big you know, movements in the world, they've all been based on fear. You know, you know, the fear of the retribution, the fear of whatever. You know, the stories are told over and over and over again. Okay, so basically, you know, behave like this, otherwise, you know, great pain will be inflicted upon you in some way, shape, or form. So if you think about desire is only one level above fear. So there's not much consciousness there. It's logarithmic. But look at the emotion of desire. It's craving. There's not much energy in craving, isn't it? It's completely egocentric. Look at the process that you're involved in, your life process you're involved in is enslavement. Well, that's what they want. Predictability, conformity, servitude. It's enslavement. So the more you desire something, there's no power to create. There's no power to achieve in desire. And so most people are desired. Look at the live view of desire. It's disappointing, which is where most people are at. From desire, we can actually stimulate a person by getting them to go up a level to anger. So we can piss them off. You can poke them, punch them, and move them around and slap them. And if they get angry, hey, congratulations, they've just taken a great leap forward. Rationally and logically, it doesn't actually sound like that. But you've got to get somebody angry enough to do something about it. Otherwise, they sit in their desire. We can't do a bloody thing about it. They're operating at craving, enslavement, and disappointment. So, you know, if you get them moved up again, hey, look, you know, get some aggression. Ah, look, now I've got some energy moving. Yeah, if you can move them up to pride, well, you know, we've become sort of demanding. But what happens if you can move them up to courage? courage is the first of the positive forms of energy. So anything under 200 is calibrated as negative. Everything above 200 is calibrated as positive. So look at courage. Well, there's affirmation, there's the emotion, I can. So the process is empowerment, self-empowerment. And look, the life view is now, it's feasible. It becomes possible. Only after courage is the level of consciousness. If you look about the one above that, neutrality. Look at where trust is. What gives away at neutrality? How do you know that you're now entering the space of neutrality? Because it's pretty hard to know that you're entering the space of courage, because, like, you know, well, how do you actually measure it? You can get a kinesiologist to measure it. So you can get people to measure, you know, what level of consciousness that you're at. But how do you know? Because it's pretty hard. If this, you know, like, how do you, we all think at the right point we'd be courageous. And of course you probably all would be, but how do you actually do them on a daily basis? Well, it's easy to do the next one above it, which is neutrality. So the one thing that falls away at neutrality is resistance, because that's actually what it means. When you no longer are experiencing resistance, so if you're experiencing resistance in any thought form or physical form whatsoever, you now know that you're not operating at that level. So you're somewhere below, you know, might not be sure, right? But that's the dead giveaway, right? That's the magic pill, is resistance. Now, what happens after resistance falls away? Willingness appears. And this is like logarithmic. So there's a huge jump between 250 and 310. But look at willingness. The emotion is optimism. Well, we've got to feasibility at courage. We got to optimism. And look where intention is. It's willingness. The process is intending. Now, what about integrity to your intention? We might all have intention, but what we're missing is the integrity to intention, because we keep allowing ourselves to be distracted. And so we're giving our attention units away. And life becomes hopeful. Acceptance is 350. Forgiveness transcends. Now the life view is harmonious. Up and up we go. Basically, we want to get past our social conditioning. Your physical you has been conditioned through practices designed to produce limitations, and limitations are always evident in resistance. Our conditioned cells operate within the vibrational pull of the shadow. Our shadow self continually runs destructive interference patterns on our energy. So it runs interference or destructive interference, because you can have constructive interference where, you know, the energy would be enhanced, or you can have destructive interference where the energy is weakened with the consciousness of your inner you. So doubt, worry, stress, they're all destructive interference patterns. This is because your physical you is conditioned to serve the system. The system is actually not designed to serve you. So you now have to develop response-ableness to be able to serve you, because the system's not going to do it for you. Your physical you obeys the processes of social hypnosis. It's learned to become an obedient servant of the social system in which your physical body lives. Over time, you create your life through conditioned software, which is why most people experience results that don't reflect their true potential. You are capable of so much more. But you're just going to understand that you can't do it with the way that the software is programmed. No matter how much you borrow to try and make it work better, no matter how many more hours you put into it, no matter how much harder you want to focus it, what we need to do is put in new programs. And that's not as hard as it seems or hard as it sounds. It's just a repetition process, and you have all done that, and you're all doing it now. If you're working with Keegan, you're doing repetition of something. Okay? And the more repetitions you do of whatever those things you are doing, the better at it you get. That's the way that it happens. Okay. So you've already got the technique down pat. So we just got to now focus it like a laser. Think about your enculturated cells, and let's have a look at a standardized lifestyle that journeys through, basically an age-related process. Okay, so we enter this world, and we enter this world with 100% potential to be anything that we could even imagine, anything that we wanted. All possibilities are open as soon as we are brought into this life. Okay, we can actually be anything. So we're born with 100% potentiality. So basically, we do rapid learning from ages between 0 and 2. And so we're going to now emulate and ape our environment because our mirror neurons are going to do it for us. So we're going to learn through observation. Okay, now, depending on the environment we're in, and this is just a standard life, then hang on, we're starting to learn that some things are available and some things aren't available. Basically, between the ages of 2 and 5, we acquire this thing called language, and this thing called language has got to do with culturally created meanings. And so we learn parameters, we learn boundaries, we learn these notions of right and wrong and good and bad. And we learn of these concepts of success and failure as basically concepts. So basically, at this stage, we're kind of sort of defenseless. We don't exhibit independent mind patterns as yet. So basically, there's no defenses to the content of our environment, and our potential takes a little bit more of a nosedive. Then between maybe the ages of 6 and 10, we're starting school. We're certainly, we experience sort of peer pressure, and this is obviously happening, prior to this. So, we experience, other people and other environments, and we learn to conform within whatever those environments are. So we model, the people around us. And then we start to learn of these concepts of reward and punishment, and basically content and structure. So structure is a deep sort of psychological process that goes on, and content is the learning at each stage. So at some point I can talk to you about content and structure. It's a real mind opener when you can really get into understanding what that process is and how social engineers use it to control. But basically, we're now conditioned to serve, between the ages of 11 and 20 odd, so to speak. So now we're in that sort of preparation stage for job life. And so we're in that preparation for lifelong job ready servitude. And that's what we're being, conditioned to do through that sort of social engineering and that sort of education process. So we learn these things based on fear. We learn these concepts of insecurity. And so basically the lower levels of consciousness start to develop, and our potential that we're born with takes a little bit more of a nosedive. And so between the ages of 40, we're sort of in that work environment, and now we're into consumerism. And so basically we're seduced into buying and buying and buying and buying. So we earn money through the job and then we spend. We earn money through the job and then we spend. But hang on, the software is not working. So let's take out a huge debt against that software, shall we? Because if we take out a huge debt, that'll make us wealthy. Well, I'm sorry, but no, it doesn't. And it's just a lack of understanding of how money works. So we're seduced into earn, spend, borrow, earn, spend, borrow. So we take on debt in the form of credit, in the form of mortgages, in the form of whatever. So we move towards gratification, and the closer and the more immediate the more we move towards gratification, the further away from freedom and independence we move. And so we start to live life through social hypnosis. We start to take a real nosedive, and at some point we, in our 40s and let's say our 80s, we depart this world. And you sort of ask, well, what percentage of the percentage that we were born with did we actually get to experience as, human potentials? And the chances are not much. It's all been socialized and conditioned out of us. So basically, we live life through social hypnosis. It's really ideal if you have a midlife crisis, you know, you have this sort of wake up call. And some people do have this sort of what they call this midlife crisis, you know, oh shit, you know, what's my life about? Oh, what's my purpose? Oh, you know, geez, I wish. And so at this stage, if you have a midlife crisis, great, you can do something about it. So, you know, people have varying amounts of success because, oh, look, they have this initial burst. But as Guy says, look, you can hang on to this burst for about 5 minutes, 5 days, 5 weeks, five whatevers, 5 units, and then that's gone, and now it takes a bit of a nosedive. And so, you know, great, thanks, Guy, spot on. And other people have, you know, various forms of success. So, you know, this was me at 40, of course. I was dead flat broke, not having realized any of my potential. And so I'm not going to be, I realized that. So I wanted to part this world in my little rocket ship, getting back to getting as much of out of me as that 100% possibility exists. And so that was me. Just, you know, I'm going to die, but I'm going to die on the upward trajectory. I'm not going to die on the downward trajectory. I hope that makes sense. And so it's really interesting that, you know, a little in a little bit in one of the presentations I'm going to talk about. You know, one of the quotes that came out of What the Bleep Do We Know by Joe Dispenza, he says, perhaps we're just poor observers. So, you know, what does he actually mean by this? You know, so most people can't actually see the journey in front of them, yet alone the destination where that journey is leading, because we're so conditioned, and that software is so conditioned by social engineering. So think about this. If I were to, let's say I could do this experiment, I could get basically anyone. I can do this experiment in America. I can do this experiment in Australia. I can do it basically in any modern economy. Let's say I'm going to get everybody who's 80 years and older into a room, you know, just do this thought experiment. And so basically they're at 80 years. And so now I'm going to ask them, hey, what are your results around money? What are your results around happiness? What are your results around lifestyle? What are your results around health? What are your results around, you know, relationship, blah, 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 blah. Okay. So if I could actually do that, then I would start to think about, majority of them would be pretty much dead flat broke, I mean, living off some forms of pensions or some form of social housing, or, you know, they're actually really struggling on the street. So hang on, they started with 100% potential to be as free and independent as anybody, but they didn't get there. So what about, you know, are they, you know, really in strong relationships and have lots and lots of friends? And majority say, no, I'm actually quite lonely. And what about their health and, you know, the functionality of their bodies? No, you know, the majority would be, some people are okay, but I'm just talking about the majority, you know, on average. So most people have got some form of chronic disease going on. You know, it's really amazing. Whenever I've got a cause to go and see the medical establishment or whatever it is, one of the first questions they always ask me, because, like, you know, I look like an old man now. So one of the questions they always ask me is, oh, what medications are you on? And when I say none, their eyes light up. I say, really? It's just amazing. I understand the world that they're coming from. They generally don't get old people coming in and say, you know, they're going to bring a list of medications. So basically, and they're reasonably unhappy. So how did they get there? Well, you know, it's a journey through life. And most people can't see because we're not conditioned to see. You know, the older people are sort of hidden from social view. In more traditional societies, they're not. They're basically, they're the people that hold the wisdom. They're the people that we exalt. We want to be, we want to share, because they've got all of the experience and they can tell us the ways. But for us, it's the, you know, in Western worlds, it's the exact opposite way. So these are the effects. Well, what are the causes? Well, basically the causes are the journey itself. You know, if I was to plot each age group as 5-year increments, see, the 5-year-olds never look at the 10-year-olds. and what they're experiencing. The 10-year-olds never actually look and see what the 15-year-olds are experiencing. 15-year-olds never look at the 20-year-olds. 20-year-olds never look at the 30-year-olds. 30-year-olds never look at the 40-year-olds. Nobody looks up the front. And yet up the front of this line, broke, lonely, diseased, unhappy. That's the result of social engineering. That's the result of the software. They're the effects. The causes are over there, and people are on this thing called life, but nobody's looking because we're so busy being distracted into our immediacy. We don't take time to look up the front and go and ask the older people, hey, what would you have done differently? Einstein gave us ways of breaking free of conditioned results. His discoveries overturned the classical view of the universe as something governed by these immutable laws of space and time. No, it's something different here. His research presented the universe as something that is so much more fluid and so much more malleable. Wacko. If it's fluid and if it's malleable, all I've got to do is have my energy impact on that in the most positive or constructive interference patterns. Social engineering is doing the exact opposite, destructive interference patterns by getting you to operate at lower levels of consciousness rather than high levels of consciousness. So classical physics maintains that everything is made up of matter, which can be reduced to its particles, the building blocks of matter. So for instance, we've got a view of causality that arises from the bottom up. So there's all of these building blocks, and one impacts with the other and interacts with the other, and hey presto, it builds from there. So basically, the term for the classical view of physics is upward causality. So classical science references the interactions of these basic building blocks, which are, particles such as atoms, and atoms make molecules, and molecules make cells, and cells make a brain, and so on, and so on, and so on. So basically, the classical view of science is that the ultimate cause of all things is interaction between these elemental particles that basically cause these particles to basically build upwards. So basically, it's upward causation. And so this is a quantum scientist called Amit Goswami. Really, if you can read any of his work, get into him. He's just he's a character, but really, really clever. So in this view, he says, what human beings, you and I, think for as our free will does not exist because it's all predetermined. So we don't have free will. It's only an epiphenomenon, a secondary process to the causal power of matter, quote unquote. Now, and any causal power that we seem to be able to exert on matter is just an illusion, so says classical physics. And this is the current paradigm, or this is the the scientific paradigm, or the contemporary paradigm. So Amit Goswami. Now, quantum physics, on the other hand, takes a different view of causation. So we know what mental causation is, and so now we're causation is the process that has an impact on and in the external world. So everything starts with consciousness. And so we just looked at the levels of consciousness. Is it fear? Is it desire? Is it pride? Is it anger? Is it shame? Is it denial? Is it guilt? Is it courage? Is it neutrality? Well, neutrality you can actually measure, because if there's resistance, you know that neutrality, we're not at that level. So fine, we're somewhere down because we're not above it. Okay, so we don't play a trick of mind. And it's not contextual, it's not situational, okay? So basically, that everything starts with consciousness, and that consciousness is the actual ground of all being. So what was once considered to be solid matter is really composed of pulsating or vibrating strings of energy, which can neither be created or destroyed, but you can actually change form. So if energy can't be created or destroyed, then the energy you need is already there, okay? You don't actually have to invent anything. It's already there. So now all you got to do is impact it, because if you impact it through your level of awareness and through your level of consciousness, then you can actually then have a causal effect in your external world. And basically all I did was impact money and had a causal effect of that in the external world. And so we know where money is. You don't have to invent it. You don't have to go and hunt it up. You don't need to do, you know where it is. It's in somebody else's pockets, in somebody else's purse, it's in somebody else's bank account, it's in somebody else's credit card. The government, they'll just print more of it. So, you don't even worry about that. You just got to impact it so that, basically it comes your way rather than how it's being impacted to go their way, from you to them, rather than from them to you. Okay. So again, it's just energy. All you can do is just reverse the energy form. Okay. So researchers observed that consciousness has an impact on form, and that consciousness creates through a process that they call, or they term, downward causation. So if we can take, this is like back to Bruce Lipton, epigenetics. That's downward causation. There is something higher at work than the expression of our genes. There's something up there. So epic means above. Okay, so he's talking about downward causation. Our free will is real, notes Goswami. When we act in the world, we really are acting with causal power. If you're acting unconsciously, it's causal power. If you're acting non-deliberately, it's causal power. If you're acting by having your bits of attention hijacked, it's causal power. You are doing the creating or the causing of the effects that you are experiencing. This view does not deny that matter also has causal potency. It does not deny that there is causal power from elementary particles upward. But quantum physics insists that there is also downward causation. It shows up in our creativity and our acts of free will, or when we make moral decisions. In those occasions, we're actually witnessing downward causation by consciousness. So part of the recipe is the level of downward causation that you are impacting into the environment, or that you're expressing, or that you are authoring into the environment. What is looking is essential in order to manifest possibility into actuality. And something that I really encourage you to observe and to study, if you like, and there's lots of really good videos on YouTube. If you can get hold of the movie What the Bleep Do We Know, excellent, but you can get snippets of What the Bleep Do We Know. So if you just look at the split screen experiment or the observer effect, okay? So just really wrap your mind around that and discuss it with each other and in the context of this lesson in downward causation. So it's the observer. So you are the observer, and you are either impacting the environment consciously or unconsciously, okay? But you are impacting the environment. And that's what the observer experience says. It doesn't matter whether the observer is a camera. Basically energy knows that somebody is observing. And so energy responds to the observer, which is the observer effect. You take the camera out, you take the scientist out, nobody present. Energy manifests different, it results in different manifestations. Stick a camera there, even though there's nobody there, the energy changes. So it's the observer effect. So manifest possibility into actuality. And so only when the observer looks, only then does the entire thing become manifest, including time. So if you are unconscious in terms of your looking, you're still impacting. But when you are consciously looking, in other words, you are consciously manifesting. In other words, you've got your eye on your goal and you're doing repetition of your goal, and you're not allowing your units of attention to be hijacked. Now you're manifesting at a higher rate than not. Okay, so you know, it's a bit of a thing to get your mind wrapped around, but we can continue to explore this over time. So the question you might ask is, how do you use your power of downward causation and your innate quantum capacity of freedom of choice, or free will, to manifest possibility into actuality in order to achieve the ideal outcomes? If you are not achieving the ideal outcomes, then you are not actually using your powers to impact possibility into actuality, or you're using them unconsciously to continue the work of the conditioned software. So the secrets to high achievement lay within the realms of intention and in paying attention to what you intend. If you break either intention or attention, then once the link between intention and attending to your intention is broken, then the light is off. Okay, so the goal is not existent. You've given your attention over to something else. Okay, once you've given your attention over to something else, then the link between attention and intention is broken, the light switches off. So in other words, you've been hijacked. And an important aspect is now having integrity, your level of integrity to your intention. You may have the best of intentions, but you might not have integrity to those intentions because you're being swayed by all of those who will hijack or distract. Most people fail to maintain integrity to their intention, and this process produces the point of breakdown, which then fails to turn possibility into actuality. Now, repetition is integrity to intention. So if you're doing repetition, you've got the solution, you've got the process, you've got the pattern, you've got the skill set. Now let's apply it to either business or to money making or to cash developing or whatever. And then the more cash you got, or the more the less stress you've got, the more you can come out to play. Once you understand that consciousness imposes form on energy through this process called downward causation, you can begin the necessary learning to move past your point of breakdown. Goswami notes that quantum possibilities are possibilities of consciousness itself, which is the ground of all being. Our looking is tantamount to our choosing. If you're looking over there, you're choosing it. If you're looking into drama, you're choosing it. If you're looking into social media, you're choosing it. But none of that is going to allow you to achieve higher levels of lifestyle. From all the quantum possibilities, the one unique facet that becomes your experienced actuality, and that's what now we want to change, is your experienced actuality. And you've got all of the mechanisms in there to already do it. Now, do we have the skills yet? Probably not. Okay, so we need to build skills over time. But first, we probably need to get some more content. So be conscious of what you're choosing. Your results are the indicators of your choosing. So your results are not happening by anxious, they're happening by accident. They're happening by non-deliberate causation. Consciousness is the ground of all being. Consciousness imposes itself on downward causation. So consciousness can be described as anything that can generate, receive, or utilize information. Low levels of consciousness can generate, receive, and utilize information as higher levels of consciousness are capable of. More creativity, more downward causation, purposeful downward causation, deliberate causation is achieved with higher levels of consciousness, not lower levels. Social engineering, social manipulation, social concern, social herding is achieved with lower levels. In receiving and utilizing information, consciousness creates reality by selecting from an infinite field of possibilities. You select the reality that you want, think it into existence, emote it into existence, and then go to work on creating it into your physical reality. Physical reality is the slowest of the speeds. You can think it into existence lightning fast. You can emote it into reality in a very quick fashion. The higher the emotional charge you get something, then the more power you're giving that energy wave. Then you just get to work and manifest it in the physical world. And you do that through repetition of behavior. There are many levels of consciousness, and each level filters information so that it matches the level of awareness. If you're coming from fear, you're going to look for information that's filtered that supports that fear. If you're coming from desire, you're going to filter information that supports that level of desire. Lower levels cannot attract or experience what higher levels of consciousness can attract and experience. Thoughts are energy patterns which inform a person's level of consciousness. Most thoughts are not original, nor consciously intentional. They're formed through the habits of schooling, through the habits of conformity, through the habits of social engineering, through the habits of distraction. People don't think about the words and the language that they use. They just do them. They don't think about where their beliefs come from, where their values come from. They're just there. Mostly, thoughts are just repetitions of socially engineered content, which is why most people experience the same results year after year after year. The world lines up according to the energy of the thoughts that you produce. Your world is the sum of your repetitive experiences. And if there's some invisible hand turning you upside down and shaking all the money out of your pockets into somebody else's pockets, then let's actually turn that picture up the other way, shall we? Conditioned thinking produces what social engineers intend for it to produce, which is basically conformity, predictability, and servitude. I'll open it up for questions. Thoughts? Observations? Concerns?
I think there's too many questions, but
Too many questions. Let's get to 3 many questions and we'll be happy, shall we?
I think I want to start with a great observation, which was that I noticed that I'm even approaching this learning experience through a competitive lens.
Aha.
I noticed that at the beginning, I'm here to prove to myself and other people that I am able, that I can do things through what I say and how I show up instead of the results that I'm getting. So I'm playing this like status game instead of a game of actually getting the results that I want. And then I saw that also happens in my time. Like I'm not only competing with other people in terms of being like the best learner, but also compete on my own time units are competing with each other. So it's like I'm doing one thing, but I'm stressed that I'm not doing other things. The limits, the finite limits of my time are causing so much friction and fear that I'm never actually doing one thing at a time. And for weeks, I will actually do nothing because the feeling of that contradiction is too painful to bear. And so I'd rather do nothing than attempt to do something and feel how much other stuff I'm missing out on.
Okay, so how is the way that you're going about things, how is that working for you?
It's not.
So what's the solution?
It's to become aware and identify and recognize when I'm in that internal state, because as soon as I'm aware of it, I have the power to shift it into a state which actually allows me to become focused and engaged in whatever I'm doing. So it's the awareness
Do you
using.
think so?
Yeah, I do.
Okay. So this morning I gave you a big sort of spiel about content, which is awareness. But awareness doesn't change a diddly squat. So what has to change?
Intention.
No?
Behavior.
Yeah, thank you. You can be aware of it, but you'll just go into old habits because you've done that for 10, 20, 30 years, whatever old you are. And you've given your whole life over to contest behavior, competitive behavior. And that's nothing short of positioning for approval. And if you're positioning for approval, you're positioning for positive regard because you want to be the best. You want to be the best learner. You want to prove to everybody. You want to prove to yourself. What the fuck? Who cares about the opinions of other people? You do, apparently. You're not going to stop doing that simply because you're aware of it, because you've been doing it all your life. That's behavior 101, 202, 303, however many more you can count up to. I can't count past 3, so
But those thoughts
listen to your language, guy. I'm sorry.
and
What was
those,
the first word that came out of your mouth?
but
What does that mean?
no.
No, it means resistance. Resistance to the idea. You can't sit with the idea. So you've got to do a but, and now we've got to get into some repetitive behavior, are we? You want me to understand your world.
and those thoughts and feelings.
Lovely change up in language patterns. But this is really important. So, just understand that we're so programmed. We're so programmed. And we're going to change that by behavior, not through awareness. Awareness is just one part of it. Okay. So we can be aware of one thing. We can learn everything in the books. We can be so totally aware that, our lives are so screwed up. We're so totally aware that I can't make this happen, or I'm not making this happen, or I'm not experiencing this, or that, my business isn't going the way that's I wanted to go, blah, 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 blah. But it's been able to do something about it that positively causes a different set of effects. And so you can be aware that you're constantly positioning for positive regard. And that means that you are always living life at effect, not at cause. And even though you can get heaps and heaps and heaps and heaps and heaps of positive regard, as soon as you can get it, somebody else can take it away from you. So it's never satisfying, it's never sustainable, and you can't fill the void with it. Any other thoughts? Or do you want to sort of have a bit of a break, go and grab a cuppa and something, or? It just gets more complex the further we move down this little rabbit hole.
I would be down for a short break. So
Okay,
if
look,
you're asking, why
let's
not?
take a few minutes. I'll come back I'll just go and make a cup of coffee and come back. So I'll just go and it'll take me 5 minutes. So whatever you
5
can do
minutes,
there,
perfect.
I'll be back in a minute. Okay, see ya.